Okay, everybody, today you're going to learn about abstraction through simplification. Sounds much more complicated than it really is. So, simplification is a constant in design, and that simply means making things less complicated. Illustration is often the mode to go when it comes to simplification, photography often being kind of the opposite. We want to get our point across as designers as quickly and as powerfully as possible. And I think I'm recording these lectures out of order, so I'm not entirely sure if I said this yet, but the brain wants to work as little as it has to. It wants to save some brain power up to do important survival things like getting food and not being killed. So it doesn't want to waste time looking at things longer than it needs to. So that's one of the reasons simplicity is a great tool for marketing or any kind of messaging. So in design with simplification, what we're basically doing is distilling reality down to its essential parts. So if I want to do something with a figure of a man in it, what are the elements that I need to convey manness, to make sure that I'm getting my point across? So it's going to be different for everyone. But like if I ask you to draw a rhinoceros in as simple a way as possible, you're probably all going to make sure you have a horn on it and probably 4 legs. So there's qualities in real things that you would want that are essential in order to communicate what the object actually is. So here's more distilling down of reality. Through simplification, we often move away from literal towards the abstract, and the abstract can often be bigger than life. Kind of moves it away from all the details. Like if we're looking at this, if this was a photograph of President Obama, you'd be maybe saying, "Oh, I wonder like what nice skin he has," or I wonder, where he got that tie, or should he be wearing a pinstripe in that suit, or I wonder if he just got a haircut. Like all the little details that we can get distracted by when something is too real. When you move it, when you abstract it, you simplify it, you move it away from that reality, and it becomes more of an idea of something, which is perfect for a political campaign. Logos as a whole are super duper, usually simplified images that pack a narrative, tell a story. There are exceptions. I mean, this is a lot less. Oops, there's Nike. A lot more simplified than, say, Les Misérables, but this is, basically down to dots and lines as well. Still pretty simple. So less is more in this case. So remember the Gestalt theory about unity. The brain has a desire to simplify. It wants to see this as 2 shapes and not as 3 shapes. We want to reduce it. It's the brain's tendency to do that. So that's one of the reasons that these more simplified shapes, images appeal to us. And historically, more simply executed objects like icons, say, for the Olympics, were easier to produce. In the old days, when printing was more expensive, to do something in one color, like just say black ink, as opposed to 4 colors, all the colors of a flag, for example, it was significantly cheaper to do it as one color. So these designs were done in a way that they were just simple shapes. There's no gradations, there's no values in them. It's just black and white. And although printing has changed somewhat, silkscreen printing has not changed. That's the same. If you've ever silkscreened, you put a screen on, you put a color down. You put the next screen, you put a color down. That's much closer to the old-fashioned method of printing. The science has proven that we absorb visuals more readily than text. In part, it's because the brain wants to do less, like I said. The less it does, the quicker it registers an object, and the longer that also is true, the longer it retains the information. In part, it's because the symbol has a more universal appeal, but it's also because we all want to see order, and our brains do not want to work harder than they need to. How many times is he going to say that? But how do you simplify something? This is a study by Picasso. Abstraction through simplification, focus attention on the essential details. That's what I was talking about before about the rhino. And while Picasso used line here, line and shape become what he reduces this bull down to. Actually, never is a ton of value. By value, I mean different levels of gray, something other than black and white. He does it more with texture, sort of in those first two columns, but he reduces it down. I mean, if you go with the simplest one, it's in the second row, last column. That is simplified down. That's a Pictionary drawing there. No offense to Picasso lovers. Not a criticism, just a comment. Simplification, using just simple black and white, explores positive and negative shapes. And we have to figure out which visual cues are necessary for us to recognize what exactly is going on. That's why there's so much more artistry to something like this than people think. They think, I could do that with a paintbrush and a black ink, and it's not that easy. So here's a study going from literal and very detailed into simplified and abstract. A lot of it depends upon when you say you're choosing a subject to draw in the study, how your light falls on the object. Very often is the case. And that will make more sense in a few minutes, I hope. But okay, let's just move on there. So recognition of an object frequently depends on understanding what the shapes are, the necessary visual cues, because some parts are going to be more important in identifying what something is than other parts. Like, for example, if you do a phone but don't show any of the buttons or don't show the part where you talk, it might be hard to identify as a phone. If you show that rhino and just show an ear and a hoof, it's like, well, that could be an elephant. Well, not an elephant because they have different ears. It could be a hippopotamus. So you got to make sure you're showing the essential elements. Sort of already said this, but if we're setting out to create a simplified version of a bull, what are the elements we need to present, quote, bullness, end quote? Probably horns, 4 legs, a tail, maybe a ring in the nose. It's not what Picasso did, but that's something that you could do if you were tasked with this same study. How far can you go and still recognize the object? This is another student did. This is not my students. These are something I found online. Moving to the more abstract. Often the object is easily read as black or white against a contrasting background, because that's pretty much what you want to think. It has to work in black and white. You can see in all these how you can see all the tones, the value tones in the pencil sketches there, and it gives way to the black marker, which is just one tone. It's just black. There's no value in that. No tonal range. So often an object is easily read as white or dark against a contrasting background. So we read this: the positive area is the tree and the ground, and the sky is the white area. But we also talked about, we talked about this in foreground and background, how you could play with the positive and negative space, that sometimes neither one, the light or the dark, can be considered to be the background, and the shapes appear to be interchangeable, which creates this wonderful visual tension. And it's a good thing when I say visual tension. I hope you don't think I mean something bad when I say tension. I would say visual interest, dynamism. And this sort of interplay can lead to a whole other level of abstraction. I think that's super cool. The visual play allows designers to communicate more information without making a complex design. Remember, we're talking about basically reducing something down as far as it can go and still have as much impact as possible. Like how much can you reduce? I'm thinking of a food analogy, and I'm not coming up with one in my head. When you reduce food down, it basically gets rid of the liquid. It makes it less and less and less, but the flavor gets more and more intense. So if you look at this, the interplay of the dark and the light is wonderful, because these actually tell a story. I mean, every one of these, particularly Hope for Africa. I mean, when I first looked at that, I didn't see the faces. in the positive space, but there it is. So it tells you a lot of what's, what this organization is. Older people, younger people, has to do with Africa. It's not just Africa, it's not just people. And this hope for peace with the two children running with the dove between them. I mean, without even the word on there, with the dove, you pretty much know it's something about peace. The animal's very cool. So you get more for your money. You're using your real estate very wisely. And by real estate, I'm kind of kidding when I say that, but if you're talking about people's attention spans as being finite, then yeah, this is important to make this as impactful as possible. There's another one. We've already seen this one. It's going to be called Gestalti the shark. Good design is always based on relationships. It's all about every element, how it interacts with every other element. So relating geometric shapes to each other, relating them to each other is easier than relating complex organic shapes. Like doing the As always, for me, design is a tug of war between saying the most, but saying it with the least amount of elements. You see that, so simplification through abstraction allows us to do that. We also can employ, we saw some of the tricks, repetition, we have cropping and framing, use of positive and negative space, being aware of that, use of implied line as opposed to a full line, a full outline. These are all things we can do to get our point across with the least amount of stuff. So, okay, that's the end for this, for abstraction, and we're going to be working on logos coming up, and there's more lectures on that. But for now, this is done. Go do your quiz. I'll see you at the next class, and want you to all take care. Bye.